The drums of Fiesta Grande rose with the morning, threads of music drifting through Chiapa de Corzo, like color carried on the wind. In a town glowing with dancers, masks, and ribbons, two people moved through the same crowd. Without knowing, the night was already choosing them. An ISFP, quiet as a breath between songs, working with his hands, feeling everything. An ENFP, bright as the lanterns that would fill the sky, returning home with a camera and a heart that rushed ahead of him. Before the festival ended, something small would fall. Something unexpected would spark, and the night would show them what it means to lose one thing and find another. This is Men Being Too Intimate Season 2. The night we found what we lost. Emiliano always woke before the noise. He stepped into the courtyard with a woven basket balanced against his hip. The clay tiles beneath his feet were still cool, the air carrying the faint smell of wood smoke and the sweetness of tamales steaming somewhere down the street. His mother always said mornings here had a different kind of warmth, the kind that felt like it was choosing you gently. He believed her. Inside, the loom stood waiting, threads stretched tight. Yesterday's work folded neatly. Scarlet belts, patterned shawls, earrings he had woven late into the night when the house fell quiet. He touched them once, checking the knots, the colors, the weight of each piece. Today, their stall would open early for the first big crowd of the Fiesta Grande. Tourists would pass through. Dancers would whirl by. Music would gather in the plaza until the air vibrated. It was beautiful. It was also overwhelming. He took a slow breath, shoulders rising and falling. Another festival day. Another day of smiling through noise. Luca always forgot how warm the air felt when you stepped out of the Tuxtla airport. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that felt like someone pressing a palm gently to your back, guiding you forward. He tugged open the taxi door, tossed his camera bag in beside him, and slid in with a breath that tasted faintly of sugar and dust. He'd lived in Mexico City long enough to call it home. But this small place was the root beneath every part of him. By the time the taxi pulled up to his family home, a modest peach-colored house with a shaded patio and a wind chime made of shells, his heart was thumping with a mix of nostalgia and something he couldn't name. His mother opened the door before he could knock. Her hug was immediate, warm, the kind that reset his entire nervous system. Inside, a plate was already waiting. Tamales, fresh fruit, a cup of café de olla that smelled exactly like childhood. He ate standing, leaning on the counter, answering rapid-fire questions from his mother about work, health, food, the documentary crew. His father waved him off with a teasing, "Let the boy breathe, mujer," even though he was already smiling into his newspaper. Luca finished the last bite, brushed crumbs from his shirt, and grabbed his camera. "I'll be back late." The marketplace always felt different on festival days. Not louder, not yet. But expectant, like the town was taking a deep breath before spilling open. Emiliano preferred this hour. No shouting, no crowds. Just the sound of wooden stalls opening and the soft scrape of baskets being set on tables. He set down his textiles with familiar precision, smoothing the folded shawls so their patterns aligned perfectly. Every piece carried a memory of the night he made it, colors chosen slowly, knots tied with quiet hands, threads tightened when the world felt too loose. Emiliano hung rows of woven earrings next. When he came to the smallest pair, soft blue and red threads wrapped around a wooden bead, his hand paused. He brushed a thumb along the matching one he wore. His last keepsake from someone who no longer stayed. Not grief, not longing, just a thread he hadn't cut yet. He shook off the thought and returned to arranging the tablecloth, tugging each corner until it sat perfectly straight. As he stepped back to survey the stall, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A small documentary crew setting up equipment across the plaza. One man adjusting a camera strap on his shoulder, sunlight catching on his hair. Emiliano didn't stare longer than a second. People with cameras came and went every year. Still, something about him felt out of place and familiar all at once. He looked away quickly, returning to his work. The festival was about to begin. He just hoped it would be gentle with him today. By the time Luca reached the plaza, the festival had started humming like it always did, quiet at first, like someone tuning an instrument. He slipped easily into work mode. The crew scattered with practiced ease. Luca lifted his camera, checked the battery, adjusted the ISO. His fingers moved fast, Instinctive, familiar, like the camera was an extension of him rather than a tool. The light today was perfect. Golden, soft, but not too harsh. He filmed the dancers warming up, the swish of ribbons, the tapping of wooden soles on stone, the rhythm slowly forming in the air. He moved through the plaza with natural fluidity, weaving around people like he had grown up with these patterns. For a moment, he panned across the vendor stalls. And somewhere near the third row, a figure leaned forward, adjusting a display of woven earrings. Luca noticed the movement, not the person. Just a quick flicker of something calm inside the chaos. He zoomed slightly, curious. But a group of dancers practiced a sudden spin in front of him, blocking the shot. When they moved again, the figure was bent behind the stall, totally hidden. He lowered the camera. A strange tug pulled at his attention. He shook it off. "All right," he said to his assistant. "Let's head closer to the start of the parade." They moved in deeper into the heart of the festival. The drums began warming up. Vendors raised their voices. Children darted between legs. The town grew louder by the minute. Luca thrived in it. By noon, the festival no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a heartbeat. Drums pounded through the plaza, steady and ancient. Ribbons snapped through the air as dancers spun past in waves of color. Vendors shouted greetings, scents of tamales and roasted elote drifting with the crowd. It was beautiful. It was loud. It was everything Emiliano loved to watch, but dreaded to stand inside of. He stepped out from behind the stall, hoping the extra space might help him breathe. The sunlight hit his skin, warm and familiar. His mother's voice came faintly behind him. "Stay close, Miel." He nodded without turning. The music swelled. The dancers came closer. A sea of wooden masks bobbed in rhythm, ribbons fluttering like small flames. And then, someone bumped his shoulder. Harder than he expected. Just a ripple of crowd movement. Just a dancer shifting direction, just a passerby trying to squeeze through. But the impact sent a tiny shift along his ear. A lightness so small he didn't register it. A single piece of woven thread falling into a world of noise. The earring hit the cobblestone with the softest sound, swallowed instantly by music and footsteps. Emiliano didn't hear it, didn't feel it, didn't know. Instead, he pressed a hand to his chest, grounding himself the way he always did when the world got too big too quickly. He looked up at the parade, trying to smile at a little boy wearing a mask too big for his face. The child giggled. For a moment, the noise softened. For a moment, he felt like he was floating above it all. But something tugged at him. A quiet discomfort, like a thread had been pulled loose. He took one step backward, trying to create distance from the crowd. Trying to steady himself. Trying to decide if he should return to the stall. The plaza had turned into a living river. Masks, ribbons, footsteps, laughter, every direction moved, pulled, collided. Luca's camera captured rhythm and blur, light bouncing off carved wood and bright skirts. But then, in the middle of filming a dancer's twirl, something flickered near the bottom of his frame. He lowered the camera a little, refocused, and zoomed in. There, against the cobblestones, a single woven earring. Threads dyed in a pattern too deliberate to be tourist trinket. Colors chosen like they meant something. The kind of craftsmanship he had come here to film care held in every knot. Luca's breath caught softly. He moved quickly, decisively slipping between bodies, careful not to draw attention as he bent and lifted it from the plaza floor. Someone didn't just lose this. Someone would feel its absence. He stood slowly, scanning the crowd, letting his eyes trace faces and gestures. Then he saw movement near the vendor stalls. A man touching his right ear, then his left, then checking the ground in a widening circle. Luca's body moved before he consciously decided to. He stepped forward. One stride, then another, weaving through dancers and tourists. His camera bounced lightly against his chest, the earring clasped in his palm, protected. Emiliano bent to check under the edge of his stall. His hand brushed fabric, then floor, then air. Luca saw the exact moment a hint of panic crept into his expression. He wasn't used to the world narrowing so quickly around a stranger. He opened his mouth to call out, to ask, "Are you missing this?" Before he could speak, the drums surged louder, shaking the air. Emiliano straightened again, chest rising with a slow inhale that didn't quite steady him. His fingers hovered near his ear, checking, confirming, understanding. His gaze drifted upward. It landed on Luca. For a moment, neither moved. Luca felt the heat of the sunlight, the weight of the earring in his palm, the pull of something unfamiliar tightening low in his chest. Emiliano's eyes widened just barely, the smallest flicker of recognition that someone might have seen, might have known, might have found. "Hey!" Luca's assistant shouted from somewhere behind him. "Luca, we need you! Come on!" Luca turned instinctively toward the sound, closing his fingers around the earring. Then he jogged back toward the crew. The festival softened with the noon heat. Drums faded. Dancers rested. Vendors finally allowed themselves to sit and breathe. Emiliano lowered himself onto a stool behind his family's stall, shoulders relaxing despite the knot inside his chest. His mother handed him a plate of tamal and a cup of agua fresca. "Eat, you'll faint before sunset," she said gently. He nodded, but the food stayed untouched for long minutes. He didn't want to dwell on the earring. Didn't want to admit how easily that small piece of thread had tied itself to parts of him he thought he'd tucked away. But the absence pulled at him. His thumb brushed his now bare ear. He exhaled through his nose. Across the plaza, under a broad shade tree, Luca replayed the morning footage with his crew. They laughed at a child tripping mid-dance, shook their heads at a microphone that caught way too much wind, and pointed out shots to reshoot later. But Luca wasn't really watching. His gaze kept sliding back toward the rows of stalls, to the linen-shirted artisan who sat with a posture that looked like careful calm over quiet disappointment. Marco nudged him. "Earth to Luca. You good?" "Yeah," Luca said automatically. Marco gave him a look. "The footage isn't going anywhere. Eat." Luca picked at his torta absent-mindedly. His fingers drifted to his pocket, the earring still hidden there, still warm from being held earlier. Luca stood. Not fully sure of what he would say. Only sure that he couldn't stay sitting anymore. The festival would start again soon. Noise would return. Crowds would swallow opportunities. Luca told himself he was just walking over to check the light. He wasn't. The earring in his pocket felt heavier than it should, warming his palm every time he touched it. His heartbeat felt annoyingly present, like his chest had decided this moment mattered more than he was ready to admit. Emiliano was back behind the stall, speaking quietly with his mother, trying to focus on folding shawls instead of the space where something should have been hanging from his ear. Luca approached slowly, not wanting to startle him, not wanting to make him tense again. Emiliano looked up, just a flicker of surprise crossing his eyes. Before he could speak, his mother stepped forward with a bright smile. "You're with the crew?" "Yes, we're making a piece about the festival." Her eyes lit up. "Ah, then you need to see this. Our patterns, they come from our families, our history. Look." She lifted a woven belt, tapping each colored section with her finger. Luca glanced at Emiliano, who watched quietly, unsure whether to step in or disappear. Then he looked back at the mother, smiling. He meant it. Her enthusiasm was infectious. "This is beautiful," Luca said. "People should hear you explain it." She gasped softly. "Telling the story? On camera?" Behind Luca, Marco froze mid-bite of his torta. Luca nodded. "If you're willing, I'd love to interview you." Emiliano blinked, his mother beamed. Marco mouthed a silent bro. "Seriously?" Luca ignored him. He raised his voice just enough for the crew. "Guys, gather up, we're doing a quick interview here." Marco walked over slowly, eyes narrowed in mock accusation. "We were supposed to shoot the dancers next, remember?" Luca shrugged. "This is important too." His crew set up around the stall, and Emiliano's mother stood taller than she had all morning, smoothing her blouse, excitement radiating from her. Emiliano watched silently, trying to understand why a documentary videographer was suddenly so invested in his mother's patterns, trying not to wonder what Luca was hiding behind that soft smile. As they finished the short interview, she clasped her hands together. "You must come to dinner tonight," she said warmly. Marco nearly choked on air. Luca answered instantly. "We'd be honored." Marco pulled Luca aside with a hiss. "Party. Tonight, remember?" Luca kept his eyes on Emiliano's mother, still smiling. "We can party any night. This is hospitality." Marco stared at him like he had grown a second head. Emiliano's mother clapped once. "Good. Tonight, then." Emiliano swallowed softly, glancing at Luca with an expression somewhere between confusion and something else he wasn't ready to name. Luca felt the earring again in his pocket. Tonight, he thought, he'd return it. What the hell did you just do? Marco's voice cracked through the shade behind the stalls. Emiliano hadn't meant to overhear. He'd only stepped out to restock the front table. But the tone made him pause, hidden just enough to feel wrong staying, and too close to move without being noticed. Luca answered, voice low, controlled. It's just dinner. It's not just dinner, Marco snapped. We are not going. You can't just invite us into random houses. Luca's jaw tightened. They invited us. Because you made it sound like a documentary thing. Luca didn't deny it. This is about that artisan, isn't it? The one you were staring at all morning? Luca's head snapped up, but his voice dissolved when he finally saw Emiliano standing there, frozen. Hurt flickering across his face before he smothered it instantly. Luca's chest tightened. He moved toward him without thinking. Marco groaned behind him. Bro, Luca, don't! But Luca kept walking. The sunlight caught Emiliano's hair, his lashes, the soft tension in his jaw. He stood straighter when Luca approached, polite but guarded, as if bracing for more awkwardness. Hey, Luca said softly. Emiliano didn't meet his eyes at first. Then he did. And Luca felt punched in the ribs by how careful those eyes were. Luca opened his hand. The woven earring lay across his palm. I wanted to give you this, he said. Emiliano stared at it, then at Luca. Something complicated passed through him, relief, confusion, a tug of emotion he didn't name. Thank you, Emiliano said. His voice was gentle but firm, and about dinner. You don't have to come. I'll tell my mom something came up. He tried to step back, tried to make it easy, tried to make it clean. Luca reached out instinctively. His hand closed around Emiliano's wrist. I want to come. Emiliano looked up, really looked, his eyes flicking between Luca's hand on his wrist and Luca's face, searching for something he wasn't used to being offered. Their eyes locked. And in that suspended breath, the noise of the festival dimmed. The sunlight warmed between them, and the distance they'd been tiptoeing around finally closed. Neither moved, neither breathed. Something had begun. Something neither of them could pretend was small. The courtyard glowed with lanterns and the soft hum of family conversation, but Luca barely heard any of it. He heard Emiliano's voice, saw the way his hands moved while he talked, felt the warmth of being allowed into the space, and under the table, that was where everything shifted. It happened early in the meal. One of Emiliano's cousins squeezed past, bumping the bench. Emiliano shifted. Luca shifted. Their knees touched. Just a brush. Barely anything. But Emiliano froze for half a second, and Luca didn't move away. He left his knee there. Emiliano swallowed, eyes fixed on his plate for a moment too long. But he didn't move his leg either. And Luca felt that. Felt it like permission. As the mezcal kept appearing in front of him, Luca grew warmer in every sense. Laughing, telling stories, leaning close to hear Emiliano's quiet replies. Under the table, their legs brushed again. This time Luca didn't pretend it was an accident. A slow, gliding contact. A suggestion. A spark. Emiliano's breath hitched in the smallest, most beautiful way. Luca's fingers drifted from the edge of the table to the bench, to Emiliano's side of it, hovering near his thigh. Not touching, just close. Close enough that his pulse shifted. Close enough that he had to remind himself to exhale. Emiliano's mother noticed everything. Her smile held too much knowledge to be innocent. Drink more, Luca, she said cheerfully, setting down another round. You look like you're enjoying the company. Emiliano kicked her lightly under the table. She only laughed. By the end of dinner, Luca was glowing, from drink, from warmth, from being near Emiliano in this bubble of a world. He tried to stand to help clear plates. His legs betrayed him, wobbling slightly. Emiliano's hand shot out, gripping his forearm. Luca steadied himself by placing his free hand on Emiliano's thigh under the table. Instinctively, softly, just for balance. But the contact lingered half a beat longer than necessary. Emiliano felt it everywhere. And that's when Emiliano's mother decided to strike. She looked Luca over, saw the flush on his cheeks, the softness in his eyes, the way Emiliano's hand still hovered near him. and declared, "Mio, you are absolutely not going home tonight. You'll sleep here, in Emiliano's room." Emiliano gasped. But Luca looked at him, drunk and honest, voice lowered. "You don't mind, right?" Emiliano's stomach flipped so hard he forgot to breathe. "I don't mind." Luca smiled, then brushed Emiliano's knee once more under the table. "Come on," Emiliano said, helping him up. His voice steadier than he felt. Luca's fingers found Emiliano's elbow. His knee brushed Emiliano's again as they stood. They moved toward the stairs, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. The moment they stepped into Emiliano's room, the world changed temperature. It wasn't planned. It wasn't spoken. Luca stumbled a little when he bent to remove his shoes. Emiliano reached to steady him. Their bodies collided softly. Luca's breath hitched. His hand slid up Emiliano's chest, fingers curling in the fabric. Emiliano felt every place they touched as if the rest of the room fell away. "Sorry," Luca whispered. Except nothing about his voice sounded sorry. Emiliano's reply dissolved before it reached his lips. Because Luca leaned closer. The lantern light made the room feel too small, too warm, too intimate to resist anything. Luca's fingers brushed the hem of Emiliano's shirt. Hesitant, then certain. Emiliano's breath trembled, and that tiny, trembling breath was all the permission Luca needed. Clothes slipped away in quiet, hurried gestures. Just pulled aside by two people suddenly too hungry for distance. Skin met skin with a shock of heat. They froze for half a second, like they knew this moment was crossing some invisible border, then moved closer anyway. Luca's lips brushed Emiliano's jaw, soft and desperate. Emiliano's hand found the small of Luca's back, guiding, grounding, pulling him in. They tried to be quiet. God, they tried. The house was still. Emiliano's mother was downstairs. The walls were thin. But every laugh caught in Luca's throat, every sigh trapped against Emiliano's neck, every soft sound they swallowed, only made the moment sharper, sweeter, more charged. Emiliano's fingers pressed into Luca's waist, pulling him closer, their foreheads touching, their breaths tangled, almost impossible to contain. The lantern flickered. The bedsheets rustled under their knees. Two bodies, two hearts, finding each other in a single, breathless rush. A moment neither of them had planned, and neither would ever forget. Luca's phone buzzed. It had been buzzing every 5 minutes since dawn. He finally grabbed it, groaning. 20 missed calls and a message from Marco. He opened it. "If you're dead, I'm gonna cry, but if you hooked up, I'm even more mad. Answer your phone." Luca winced. Emiliano, still sleepy and soft from the night before, peered over his shoulder. Luca tossed the phone onto the blanket and looked up at Emiliano. Emiliano held out the woven earring. "Sit," he said. Luca obeyed. Emiliano clipped the earring onto Luca's ear slowly, carefully. The gentle intimacy making Luca's breath catch for reasons he didn't want to hide. "There," Emiliano whispered. "It suits you." Luca swallowed. Softly, "You suit me." Emiliano's ears turned pink. A beat passed, not awkward, just full. Then Luca remembered something and grabbed his phone again. "I should text Marco, before he breaks into my hotel room." He typed quickly. "Alive, not kidnapped. Explain later." Marco replied instantly. "If you show up alone today, I'm gonna delete your footage." Luca showed Emiliano the message. Emiliano laughed. "Seems like he misses you." "Yeah," Luca said, then softer. "But I want him to meet you." Emiliano froze, surprised, caught off guard. Luca nodded, scooting closer, leg touching Emiliano's beneath the blanket. "I want to introduce you to my team," Luca said. "So Marco will stop cursing at me. And because..." He hesitated, because last night wasn't just last night, for me. Emiliano's breath trembled. Not fear, just recognition. He whispered, "I'll come." Luca's whole face lit up, the kind of smile people write songs about. Before they could say anything else, "Emiliano!" His mother's voice sliced through the house like a trumpet. "Breakfast, handsome!" Luca froze. Emiliano covered his face with both hands. "Oh my God," he whispered. Luca grinned, leaning in close, voice low in Emiliano's ear. "She means me." Emiliano groaned into his palms. "I know." Their foreheads touched, their hands brushed, their smiles matched. The morning felt like possibility. When the day exhaled and the colors of the festival finally dimmed, what lingered wasn't the noise or the crowd, but the way two people found themselves in the quiet between everything. Not a promise, not a confession, just a gentle truth shared in morning light, the kind that settles softly and knows exactly where to stay, because sometimes an ENFP's warmth meets an ISFP's quiet heart in a way that feels accidental and absolutely meant. This was men being too intimate. The night we found what we lost. If this moment stayed with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories from gay audiobooks. Also, my short novel, Men Being Too Intimate, The Time We Had and I Saw You First, is now available on Kindle. You'll find the link in the description. Hope you check the stories out as well.